Guys, I always think how much of my mind is located in this space of like, but what about this and this and this? Today, that mind is in some ways on display because I invited Jay Dyer to come on, who's not only really good at debate, but he's also a kind of mind that captures ideas and then sort of fortifies them and then gives them back to us in ways that you have to think about. He's not always beloved for this. He's not always beloved for his debates. He's not always beloved by all aspects of culture, but I think today we have a good talk about why that is, why that might be true, and or why that might be false. And then we get into the lidometer and we talk about the role of humor in life and how one should go about addressing those with whom they speak. On Heavy Things Lightly, Jay Dyer. The phone's not going to start ringing. If I talk to Andrew, Jay, he's our editor guy. He's out there doing the thing with us. I got Jay Dyer here. Been a while. I've always thought about having you come on here, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great. You were at my wedding, so I'm glad to reconnect and to have this conversation with you.
We sat I don't know if you remember, we sat at the table. Everything had just happened in your life. You had this, this event of wonder. And then we sat at the table and like a bunch of like 22-year-old ortho bros started talking to you about like some theological moment. It was hilarious. I was like, oh, this is Jay's life, even at his wedding reception.
Even at the wedding, you get a bunch of questions about essence-centered distinction. And I think there was even like atheist relatives later that night trying to, argue.
Trying to rock it out with you.
Trying to be an atheist, so.
By the way, that was kind of COVID associated. I think it was COVID, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, it was. It was right in the middle of it. Yeah. Right. Maybe even right at the beginning.
But we don't know each other like besties, but it was nice. My wife basically was closer with your wife. And so I got pulled in and it was wonderful. I'm blessed to have been there, bro.
That's right. Because they were at the same parish for a good while.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk to me about this. So what we do on this pod is try to figure out, like, aren't there some lessons from before the Enlightenment that we should actually be paying attention to? And how does that work? So what's the Enlightenment to you? Because you roll like an enlightened guy. I mean, you're using rational arguments to try to help people understand things. So but what is the Enlightenment to you? How do you see it?
Well, I think the best way to describe it would be the excesses that you see with the French revolutionaries who, for example, make reason into a goddess. And I don't think they actually thought it was an actual entity, but reason became the new deity of that time. And that led to a lot of bloodshed, a lot of revolutions. After the Enlightenment, you get the Voltaire and the philosophes. So I think that reason is a tool. It's a faculty that can be used because, in Christology, for example, Jesus has a rational soul. That means he has, as part of his human nature, the faculty of reasoning. And that was declared early on, even against the Apollinarians, that if you denied that rational aspect of Christ's soul and replaced it with the divine person, the Logos, that was a heresy because it was detracting from him assuming a full human nature. So Christ heals and restores the faculty of reasoning, just like all of our other faculties, our will, our body, etc. And so our mind. And so I've always seen it as a tool. Definitely the Enlightenment and Protestant Reformation exalted it out of its due place. But, even some of the most, quote, mystical of the Orthodox saints, like St. Gregory Palamas, he wrote apodictic treatise on the Holy Spirit. And apodictic refers to Aristotelian logic. So he utilizes Aristotelian logic to disprove the filioquist position. So, in his mind, there was certainly no natural antipathy between theology and the faculty of reasoning. It just can't be put in this, goddess position.
what is here's an idea that I keep having. I as a history guy on some level, I studied it as a graduate student. Maybe it's that they're antichristing it. They're substituting it. If the presupposition is that Christ is God, then reason kind of makes sense as you go and stretch it out right into an argument. But I feel like there was a substitutionary thing going on with the enlightened philosophers. Would you agree with that? Where they're substituting reason for Christ on some level?
Absolutely. I think there was genuine reaction, legitimate reaction against the corruptions in the papal church and the Franco-papal system that people in the Protestant Reformation or the Enlightenment saw as a problem, but they had bad solutions. So they went to this opposite extreme in reacting against the papacy. And some of them, went the direction of Protestantism. Some of them went the direction of atheism and deism. So, logos theology, as you noted, itself is situated within the milieu of the wisdom texts of the Old Testament, like Proverbs, Book of Wisdom. And so when John talks about Jesus as the logos or the logic of God, I'm not saying he's equating him to logic. He's the second person of the Trinity, but there is an element of logos logic or reason that goes along with that, which is an appeal to the best elements of Hellenic and Greek culture to try to convince them of the deity of Christ and him being the Son of God. And again, you're absolutely right to replace logos, the divine person, and that truth is therefore ultimately located in a divine person, with the human faculty of reasoning, which is a pale reflection of, divine logos, is absolutely a replacement idolatry.
Is that the problem with scientism? That's it, right? I think that's what it is, right?
That's the root of it. Scientism also has, I think few people know, it kind of has a hermetic alchemical origin as well. If you go back to even some of who we think of as Enlightenment rationalist thinkers, they also were very infected by a lot of esoteric, Kabbalistic, mystical ideas. And so there can even be a Kabbalistic element to scientism, where dead matter comes alive, and you can go within to find the principles of the spark of divinity within you, and that man is trying to fix nature.
Francis Bacon, man.
Exactly.
So we're going to take a test. It's our little test on here. It's called the lidometer. I want you to take it with me before we hang up. So
okay.
People who we're gonna. It's just like 5 questions. It's highly it'll affect you, because for the rest of your life now you'll have this moniker hanging around. It'll tell you about your actual being in a way that I'll ruin your life. But just work with it. Just work with it. I promise it's coming, guys. It's coming. The lidometer. But before we get there, do this with me. So, how do you know yourself on the medias, on the interwebs? Like, are you an entertainer? Because I think you're attracting the guys who liked that part, that mystical part of the earliest Enlightenment thinkers, who were like, something's off here, let's fix it, but they didn't know how to do it. The guys I hear coming onto your shows and listening and making comments on X and all that stuff, I feel like they want something that's deeply mystical and spiritual and alchemically inclined. And I feel like you give it to them, but I don't think they understand it sometimes. I think they think you're doing some fun stuff that's not Christic. I don't know. What do you think about this class of guys that sort of love your work? Are they Christian, or how do you categorize these characters?
I think we have a wide array now of people who like what we talk about in niches. So there's kind of different sectors. For example, when we do live events, we can kind of see the schematic breakdown of this, because we don't have huge live events, but anywhere from 100 to 120 people at most of our live events. And everybody always kind of talks about what aspects of what we talk about they're interested in. So some people are there. I saw you on Alex's show. I really like what you talk about with geopolitics. And then we get a faction of the people that are like, oh, I really love all the Hollywood stuff. Because really, a lot of what I started blogging about was movie analysis, film analysis, symbolic breakdowns of films. And I wasn't really even thinking about talking about theology at the time. That actually happened kind of accidentally. Somebody said, "Hey, would you debate this atheist guy?" This was back in 2017. And he was a pretty prominent atheist at that time. And then that led to, oh, here's another atheist guy. Would you want to debate this other prominent atheist? And that kind of snowballed into doing debates, which is not something I really thought I would be doing on the internet. And then that attracted its own kind of, crowd of people who really like to see debates. And majority of that in the last 6 years ended up focusing on debating prominent atheists and Muslims. And I didn't know much about Islam in 2017 or even 2018. And then I started to learn, a good bit. So that kind of just happened on its own. It wasn't something planned, but I never stopped doing the other things that we did, like the movie analyses and writing the books on the Hollywood symbolic breakdowns and, doing the geopolitical content. So kind of what happened was I just sort of would introduce more of my own interests into the public work that we were doing to kind of test the waters. And so that led to me kind of doing more comedic stuff. I always wanted to do that. I always had that element of what we did. And I wanted to lean more into that. And so that led to a lot more openings in that realm. And then I think what happens is that people see one aspect of what I do and they kind of think, oh, he's that guy that does this. Aren't you the Hollywood guy? Or I thought you were the debate guy.
I know you as the debate guy for whatever reason. That's how I know you.
Well, I don't like to, I think debate is interesting and it can be fun, but I think probably people think I like it more than I actually do.
That's my question. Which one, you got an hour, you're going to do some media, and it's going to be the hour you love the most. What are you doing in that hour?
I've had the most fun in the last 10 years on the big comedian podcast that we've been on, which is three of those. And, doing the geopolitical breakdowns. Those are the most fun.
I enjoy those now, Jay.
I enjoy those the most, but I have to admit, when if it's a huge Muslim debate, those have been really, like we debated the two of the top Muslims on a huge outlet a few months ago. It was me and Sam Shamoon, and we debated Daniel Hakikachu and Ijaz on Fresh and Fit podcast, and that got 3-4 million views. So that was enjoyable to be able to speak to that many people. But it wasn't the most fun debate, because a lot of times debates, they kind of become really repetitive. It's the same stuff over and over and over. And if you've been doing debates since college, like I have, you're pretty much going to be hearing the same arguments over and over and over. So I really enjoy the creativity, comedic side of things a lot more than just here, having.
Are you working with Sam Hyde?
Yes.
He got in front of us, Andrew, the editor, and I, and a guy named Simeon, Rich Summers. I think you know Rich, but So I want to do that on some level sometimes with our internecine Orthodox stupidness that happens. I want to do what he's doing sometimes with some of what we're doing, because a lot of the times in the Orthodox world, we bite at each other. And I'm not that guy. I'm not the boomer who's also like, why can't we all get along? That's not what I'm saying. There's something about the argument that at some point crosses into hilarious. You know what I'm talking about, where you're like, not this again. This needs to be torn down through something funny or cynical or something. And that's where my brother and I have this crossing of paths on the internet, I think.
Like a Orthodox version of Babylon Bee or something like that.
Yeah, something where we go. And also, you don't really know and I don't really know in the end, because it's going to flesh out as all things flesh out. It's going to flesh out as real beyond my own intellect. And people, I don't know if they can do that sometimes, or they feel like they're giving up the fight or something. I don't know. What do you think about that? Is there a place for that kind of humor?
I've always felt there's a place for levity because not everybody is called to the same thing. Like, people that are in the role of clergy, that's more appropriate for them to be involved in the doctrinal stuff, right? So actually, you know, kind of what we ended up doing in the last 6 or 7 years was, again, somewhat accidental, but there wasn't a lot of clergy presence online in 2018, 2019, 2020. Nowadays, 2025, there's way more Orthodox clerical presence online. So I feel like that's kind of a little bit of freeing, because there's less of a, you know, it's not like I'm the only voice defending Orthodoxy against the papacy or, you know, whatever. There's other people out here doing it now, which is kind of what it ought to be. Yeah. And that, I think, should be maybe a freeing up thing where we who are laity can focus on and speak to culture.
Which is what we're becoming. That's what we're good at. I mean, we're in it. So exactly. That makes sense to me.
Exactly.
It makes sense to me. For a while, did you feel...
I got a question. You know, wait. I heard you at one time were doing some stand-up.
I did stand-up in New York City for...
Interesting. Okay.
But this is 2000, or this is 19. It was right in the year before I decided I probably should get married. In fact, my wife came to a couple of my shows.
Okay.
I was pretty crass. I was just becoming Orthodox. And I was making light of, well, I don't want to get into it. We could have fun with it though. But I was making light of myself. That was sort of my routine.
Okay.
Cool guy who's not that cool.
Self-deprecating. Okay.
Yeah. I prefer that. What do you prefer if you're going to go down the rabbit hole of comedy?
I don't, you know, I mean, I'm not opposed to stand-up, but a lot of what we do is a little more kind of sketch-oriented, you know, impressions, kind of goofy, wacky.
Yes.
It's silly stuff. It's, you know, I vibed a lot more with the style of stuff that Sam Hyde does as opposed to like a Bill Burr kind of stand-up. I'm just not that kind of a person.
Yeah, that's acting. I mean, the stage is different when you're on there up there by yourself. Yeah, I know what you mean. How about our friend Scooter Downey, who did Hoax you know him pretty well, don't you? He really loves you, man. He speaks highly of you.
Yeah, we got to be good friends with him he eventually moved to the Tennessee area, but yeah, we spent multiple evenings and days with Scooter. He's the one that sort of got me on that last episode of the Tucker show on Fox, where we were covering Eat the Bugs, and I was dressed up like Klaus, and that's the kind of stuff I like to do. Like I dress up as somebody and go and do something silly rather than just standalone stand up. But
did you see our trailer that we're doing, Christianities?
Yes, mm-hmm. Yes. Scooter sent me that when he had made the first trailer.
I feel like we're obviously sort of Christian heavy right now. I mean, not Christian, sorry, Orthodox heavy. We've got a lot of we've got a lot of invitations to some really cool guys. I think you would be great on there, man. But how about a little beef? Let's do a little beef. Okay. Do you ever feel like there's a moment when you're losing your soul within the confines of a debate, not because of the words you're saying, just because of the nature of the thing itself? Do you feel like your soul sometimes ebbs away and you wish you could not ever do that again, and that maybe it's not worth it? Straw, burnt up at the end, sort of like Aquinas talks about. You ever feel?
Yeah, I think again, yeah, absolutely. Debate has its limits. Anybody who does a lot of debates will get tired of it. You'll get frustrated, even especially if you're doing multiple 4, 5, 6 hour online open forums. You're going to hear all the craziest stuff that you've ever heard. People are going to go at you from all angles. So yeah, I think there have been definitely some times where I lost my patience and got angry or something like that. But I would add that there's a lot more times where there was the demonstration of patience, which is by grace. I'm not trying to say, oh, look at my good works, but I think those are way more in the minority versus the rest of the times that are not, in extreme examples of nasty exchanges. But, sometimes people that don't do debates or not involved in that kind of a exchange, if you haven't done it for a long time, like I can recognize when people are disingenuous most of the time pretty quickly. And also we have different styles. So when it's an open forum, the assumption is that you're not at the level of a formal debate opponent, right? So when we do formal debates, of which we've done many, if it's a very prominent person, there's going to be a moderator, there's timed exchanges and responses. Whereas open forum is just kind of like any Joe Schmo. It'd be like any Joe Schmo walking into a dojo and saying, hey, I'm ready to fight, right? I mean, they're going to have to learn that you're violating, the rules of critical thinking, the laws of logic. That's a bad argument. So that's why there's interruptions and this kind of stuff at that level. And then the formal debates are a lot more kind of manicured and curated and, controlled, I guess.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and that's a long answer to your question.
No, it was a vague question. Here's another way. We do these dinners. So there's this thing called the Tamada. And the Tamada takes people through this Georgian tradition from the Georgian Republic. It was called the...
I've heard of it. Yeah, I've heard of those, yeah.
Yeah, and it's becoming something like a refuge for Orthodox and and just secular people. They're like, I want to be at that table. And I'm seeing something, I could go on and on about it. I'm seeing something quite beautiful. And what happens at the end of the night, though, is the Tamada has done a lot of talking. And also presented a lot of ideas that at a restaurant with a whole, you don't know who's coming to your sit at these 20 seaters. You get a lesbian couple who consider themselves married, and you'll get like two Baptist guys that can't even like look at them, you get wacky people all sitting at the same table, and the Tamada's job is to unite them. But inevitably you wake up the next day, these are like 4-hour events. And you have a Tamada regret. It really has never failed. And I've done hundreds. Sort of like you do a lot of debates, I do a lot of tables. But I inevitably have a Tamada regret where I'm like, do you have that? I think you must. Or not.
I mean, there have been exchanges where I regret where it went, or maybe if I said, something insulting or something like that. And I get tired of doing debates because they're somewhat tedious and laborious, but I never have a problem with the art form itself or with the notion of rhetoric. I mean,
yeah.
We're at this era where people are uneducated. They don't know that it's a part of classical pedagogy to have this ability to have, formal exchanges. And they don't even realize that if you go watch Oxford Union debates with people like, Hitchens or whoever, and they'll include jokes and jabs as part of the rhetoric. But if your arguments are all rhetoric and ad hominems, well, that would show that, you don't have any actual arguments. It's all just hot air and insults. But the idea that you can't have any jabs or whatever is just kind of weak. And we're in this idea of, postmodernity is premised on there's no such thing as truth. There's just competing power narratives. So a lot of people already from the outset think that debate's bad because there is no such thing as truth. So they just exercising your oppression over me. That's all that it is. It's just a power exchange. And so also people think that the debate is arguing. Those are different things.
It's not the same thing.
And the debate has rules. It has structure to it. So one of the things that we're trying to do is also explain and help people understand that dialectical discourse of what debate is. I don't mean dialectics in the bad way. I just mean in the sense of question answer, like Plato talked about. So anyway, but I look at last time, Acts 17, right? Paul goes into the synagogue.
Yeah, that's right.
And debates daily with the Jews. God says, come, let us reason together in Isaiah. So, these things can't be inherently wrong. It's just difficult to always do them perfectly.
So, I waited in, we met at your wedding, whatever. And then my brother, during COVID and thereafter, he started to gain a large audience. And then you guys, I would just go to an Orthodox church to visit or something. And then inevitably, Father Peter, Jay Dyer, somehow they were always the same idea and same person. And I would just be having a coffee and then I didn't really get it. So I started, of course, I looked at his website and I waded in and said, okay, what's Jay doing? Because dude, everywhere I went, there was this thing, 2021, 22, 23 right in there. And what I started to realize is people are soft. Like how else you said it just now. I'm like, yeah, they're just this is an actual thing that's taking place. It's not just some guy screaming at somebody because of a post. That's not what's happening. There's rules and there's a way to be. And then we all sort of gain from it or not, or just turn it off. And I started to get frustrated with the notion that to be a Christian was to somehow just let everyone say whatever they wanted, then hang up the phone. I don't really get that. I don't even get that as a concept in general. And so it wasn't what I thought it was. I just want you to know that, because I tend to be the empathetic version of my brother. Like I tend to be on the love truth spectrum.
You're the chill version, the chill version.
I'm the sentimentality guy. When I fall down, it's because I'm too sentimental. I think when my brother falls down, it's because his razor edge is real sharp. And you're like, dude, back off a little. So, but then when I saw what you guys were actually doing, I didn't like the characterization of it all. I think it's changed now for you. Would you agree that it's changing in terms of how people see you in the orthosphere?
Yeah, I honestly haven't paid a lot of attention to it, to be honest with you, because I mean, you know, when we do a live event, we kind of get a cross section of the audience. I can look on YouTube and see, you know, my audience is 90% guys aged 20 to 45. So that's who I'm speaking to.
Yeah.
And I think even back in, you know, 2018, 19, 20, you know, I wasn't really thinking about what's my demographics, who am I speaking to? But, you know, when we do the live events, obviously a significant portion, probably 30, maybe even 50% in some cases, are people who are young guys inquiring into orthodoxy or who have converted. Many of them, by the way, are married and have wives. So it's not just, 18-year-old incel guys who are extremely rigorous or whatever. But I didn't even, again, I guess I just didn't think about who my cross-section audience was when I was talking about stuff back then and, you know, putting up videos. And I don't think, you just don't think about, well, where's this going to be in, you know, 5 years? What will the size of the audience be then? How many people are going to be listening? You just kind of talk about stuff and respond to stuff, and you just don't think about it. So yeah, I just didn't have any plans of any of this.
Well, you're brilliant at that stuff, at responding, talking, and being present in the conversation. Like, that's really clear. What's the hardest part about it all? Like, what part is difficult as you're, you know, as a person online doing this work?
Well, I mean, I'm sensitive to my own sins and my own failings and flaws and areas of lack. So, you know, I don't want what I talk about to be the face of orthodoxy. You know what I mean? And I never had any interest in being that, which is why I'm happy to see many clerics making content. And, you know, they're really the ones that should be that. It's not to say you can't have laity doing that, but, so that's a difficulty. Obviously there's difficulties that we all deal with within the church. We deal with difficult people. Sure. We deal with challenging people, difficult clergy relationships. You know, all kinds of difficulties are tough in the world of orthodoxy as well. I wouldn't be anywhere else, but you know, there's still difficulties in this world. But
well, it's from the outside, it looks like you were led, meaning you're following something that's you're invited into. I think look, I always tell everybody, you know this, you've said this, the hand can't judge the eye, but it's all part of the same. Everyone needs to calm down. It's very hard to understand each of now the question is your disposition, right? Are you actually caring about these things, and do you care about Christ, and are you trying to live that life? That's all that. If someone's trying to do that online, I'm like, right on, bro. Like, what's the problem? Like,
yeah, I think the difficulty also is balancing doing that without, you know, making that something that that's not a display. You know what I mean? That you're not, look at me for my, you know, my online piety. And I think a lot of people fall into that, where a lot of laity, you know, maybe they get interested in orthodoxy, they convert, and immediately they have a lot of zeal, which is good. But when you try to make that your online persona and then you put up a PFP image of a saint and you're, quoting the saints every day and this and that, which it's not that it's wrong to necessarily quote a saint, but that a lot of people do this performative online stuff. Yeah. And they post their prayers and they post how they're praying and all this kind of stuff. And I've always just found that to be in bad taste. And usually in our experience, and we've dealt with these people like this for many, many years, going back to 2017, 16, 8, 9 years now. I mean, a lot of these people don't remain Orthodox very long, that have these really extreme positions. And so I just always felt that it was, when Jesus says, don't go into the market and pray and try to get everybody seeing you. So, that's why a lot of my online content, I might talk about Orthodox stuff, or I might be on somebody's podcast, but you don't see me doing a lot of that posting wise, because it's just, it's like, I remember talking to your brother some years back, and he was kind of making the point, like, you're probably at a fork in the road. You're going to have to choose. Do you want to go in a wholly, completely Orthodox direction and, write Orthodox theology books and not deal with culture, or do you want to focus more on culture? And so I think one of my friends put it that, some people are Orthodox content creators who work in media, and some people are, just Orthodox media. And I felt like, I didn't want to give up all the avenues and things that I was interested in, the comedy, the Hollywood stuff, the live events and all that. I enjoy doing that. So I'd rather be an Orthodox person who works in media, if that makes sense.
100%. In fact, the internet doesn't allow, what's the best way for me to say this?
Religious stuff is very difficult via the internet because it's abstracted.
Yeah.
It's divorced from, the here and the now, the physical, the incarnational. And that causes problems.
Guys, one quick break. There's a store. It's an eBay store. It's the First Things Foundation eBay store by Nicola. Nicola is my daughter. Nepotism alert. She's helping with First Things, is one of our beloved volunteers running the First Things Foundation eBay store. You contact her, send her a picture of the thing you want to sell. She does all the work to get that thing sold and then says, hey, you send it. You send it, you donate all of that cash to First Things. So your garage is stuffed with stuff. Unstuff it. Send it to people who want to buy it, and then First Things gets a donation. This is for people who say they don't have cash. But if you're an American, I know you got stuff. Sell it. For more, check the link in the pod notes. Back to the show.
A lot of Orthodox, priests have not perhaps spent a lot of time in Protestantism or Calvinism or or Catholicism. I've been in those worlds, those realms. I lived those worlds and realms. So, I can answer those kinds of questions, I think, pretty proficiently. So in that regard, it's helpful to people. But we always say, and we've been, we have clergy on our Discord that I've been saying for years, this is not catechesis. This is answering your questions. And so apologetics is not orthodoxy. It's just like a sign that points you in the direction. Yeah. And that's really all the internet can do. It can't, you really have to go and actually be involved.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of the things we're trying to do with First Things is, hey, okay, great job. Well done. Well said. And also you want to go work with Africans in a really cool setting that will actually teach you a lot about who you are because you live in a mud hut. Let's go. But most people don't want to go down that road. But it's a real deep embodiment. And we ended up throwing dinners for the same reason, because the Georgians taught us how to be actually present in a way where you can talk about the high things. We call them the high things at the table, the universal themes, but also you can laugh, and there's toast to humor, there's not a few dirty words now and then. The whole thing is in other words, you're really experiencing the entirety of the cosmos, like at a table, because the table is a representation of that. And so, yeah, we're all going to do it anyway, right, Jay? We're going to embody you're only going to do this thing for so long where you talk to people on the interwebs. You're going to have a life outside of that.
Yeah.
It's got to look like something.
Well, it's just like, think to stand up, and I've done stand up before, but like that you can't replace the interaction that you have in a club with the audience. If you're doing crowd work and you're making fun of people in the audience and joking with that, you can't replace that with something online. It's just an irreplaceable kind of existential encounter. And the same goes for what you're talking about with the toasts that you do, and it's the same for the liturgy and going and spending time with the guys at your church.
Yeah.
So it's, internet stuff.
Yeah. And thank God. I'm going to ask you some questions, but here's the thing. Just as I was about to ask you, you got to bear with me because I'm going to go find it on my phone. What's a boomer? Because I can tell when I'm online with my friends who are much younger. I deal with all these young guys, right? It's bad to be a boomer, it seems. How would you define boomer or normie? Will you just do the Jay Dyer definition of those things?
Well, you're, I can already look at you and see your Gen X, right? So
correct.
You can usually determine that via the degree of the gray. So if you've got like the salt and pepper, that's like Gen X for sure. But I'm in a unique position being elder millennial, right on the cusp of Gen X and millennial. So I can kind of bridge that world. But the joke of, boomers and kind of being lampooned began probably 15 years ago on the internet. I like to take credit for it because I wrote an essay back then that was just kind of a satirical thing that went mini viral back then about it. I can't prove that I literally created the boomer meme, but I wrote some essays making fun of boomers at the time and just how silly kind of that generation was from certain perspectives. It doesn't mean that I hate boomers. It was just intended to be a satirical,
for sure,
kind of critique. And it's a critique of the attitude of, just sort of high rates of divorce, preferring and bragging about monetary gain, 401ks over, the children, over inheritance, these kinds of things, blowing the money and not having an inheritance for the children. Boomerisms like automatic deference to worshiping the nation of Israel from like a Christian Zionist perspective.
Absolutely.
Boomerisms like, gambling and casinos, that kind of just the things that generation were really sort of wrapped up in: sports, idolization and worshiping of sports, and a really naive attitude towards politics that, it's GOP versus Democrats, not understanding uniparty.
Like, we'll get our guy in and it'll be better.
Yeah, exactly. Not understanding, anything to do with conspiracy stuff or, deeper geopolitical issues. Those are all boomerisms. And then it kind of became its own, a lot, as memes kind of take on a life of their own.
Mm-hmm.
And so you kind of get the meme growing and becoming not just an age group, but people having the attitude of a boomer. So you could be a Gen X person who, if you're repeating very kind of normie attitudes of politics, you might be called a boomer.
Yeah.
So it kind of just took on a life of its own, as many memes do. But that's what it's intended to characterize. And I've never ceased characterizing it and kind of continuing with that joke. Some people got offended by it, but some of my closest, best Orthodox people, my godfather is a boomer. Jim Jotras is a boomer. So not all boomers are bad. It's also part of the attitude of, this from stand up, back in the day, in the comedy world, you could make fun of anything and anybody. And it was just kind of understood that, white people make fun of black people. Black comedians make fun of white people all the time. And, it would just, so my attitude towards that was always just kind of the same audience as like a comedy club, just kind of making jokes about generations. And by the way, I've always thought boomer jokes about millennials were funny, because our age group has its flaws and its problems, and they're all pretty funny, being lazy, not wanting to work.
They're hilarious.
Yeah, all funny. So I think that, the generation should laugh at each other and not get into this hyper politicized attitude. But as you know, like after, I don't know, it seems like after the period of Bruce Jenner being Woman of the Year, all of this stuff got hyper moralized and hyper politicized to where everyone's jokes now became cancellation offenses, to where anything, people are looking for a way to say, oh, he made this joke, he needs to be canceled.
Well, I think that's what you've done really well, is describing, really I would call it like something like the last 8, 9, 10 years. I think your stuff does a really good job of saying, I'm going to use this word boomer to demonstrate something like naivete. And it's really helpful to me. I use the term light people. So coming up as an older guy, a little bit older, I'm 58, this idea, if I see one more older person tell me about their lawn, I can't do it anymore.
That's the perfect boomers and lawns. That was actually part of the original boomer meme, was the lawn.
Oh, was it? So there it is. But I had this, in the 80s, and I'd be like, I had come back from Africa, Peace Corps. I'm like, there's something wrong with this lawn fixation. And then it turned into like, the people I know in Europe and other places in the old world, they don't have lawns. That's not really a concept. And I started to realize this wasn't about lawns. This, of course, is about outward facing wealth. It's
a kind of a weird competition within the neighborhood of,
and all that. Then you start to realize there's actually reality to it. And then, of course, what I think is really good that's going on, and I saw that you've been reading, is something like, the government is also like the lawn. It's the same naivete is going on with the lawn will show people that I'm great. And the government's playing this game too, where like, don't look at this, actually just look at the lawn I've created for you to understand. And so now you're reading these documents. Just tell me, because I'm not reading them, but I saw the last couple of days you're digging down into sort of the new files that are being let out. What's going to happen with these files? Are they going to become, quote, mainstream? Are people going to be able to finally say that what's a conspiracy theory is thought of as a conspiracy theory is just actually a good theory? Because I'm troubled by this.
Well, to be fair to the boomers, I think that generation was subjected to a lot of really intense social engineering and brainwashing from the establishment. And I think that it's just sort of there's just limitations in certain generations as to how much that generation is able to decode and understand from younger generations. And so, for example, you can be an 18-year-old, 15-year-old on the internet, and you have more access within 5 minutes to what people who were CIA directors had under Carter. Wow. So that's how crazy the information, the speed of, immediacy, doesn't mean it's all right. There's a lot of disinformation, but still, like, I think that a lot of people in that generation just can't really fathom or function with that level of revolutionary information feed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And so, in other words, you can be 18 and understand false flags, 17, and you've got people who are baby boomers who still don't understand what that is.
Yeah,
and still can't grapple with that. And so, I think with the JFK stuff, even though it's kind of JFK and UFOs, that was like the only two, quote, conspiracies that the baby boomer generation was able to entertain, or maybe, Cold War communism is perhaps a conspiracy theory they entertained. But really understanding the way the world works is just a lot easier for people to decipher now because of the prevalence of information. And, this is just yet another trove of, admissions, I guess. But I don't know that it's going to affect that generation any more than any of the other.
I think that's brilliant. That generation and mine to an extent, it's going to be hard to unpack that stuff unless you've had some really wild experiences. I think.
Yeah.
Like you were talking about on your feed, lemurs were being trained to use matches to light stuff on fire.
Well, they were dosing dolphins with LSD. They were, experimenting with animals. Jolly and West used to give LSD to elephants as part of the MK Ultra experiments. So They were doing all kinds of crazy stuff. That doesn't mean it was all successful or profitable, but I mean, yeah, they were doing all kinds of stuff.
But most people can't hear lemurs with matches and then hear the next sentence you say. They bail out of the whole idea at that point. But I think lemurs with matches is going to become more and more normal. Like, I think the crazy stuff's going to become real stuff. I've always said this, Jay, tell me what you think, and then I'll give you this quiz. Because I think the guys that I know really want you to take it. It's fun. It's fun.
Okay.
It's not, don't worry, it's fun. But I think this, tell me what you think. There's no such thing as a conspiracy theory. There's just theories that lean toward good and true and theories that lean toward bad and wrong. Like, I just think everyone has a theory. And then the question is tell me, okay, now tell me about it. And pretty soon you'll find out that that's pretty dumb. I don't know what a conspiracy theory is. I don't know what they're talking about.
Well, it's a weaponized term from the JFK era. It's a CIA term that they explicitly mention would be a good way to discredit people that question the findings or the assessment of the Warren Commission. So the term itself was loaded and weighted to scandalize or to demonize anybody who had questions about the government. But here we are, the declassification of the documents pretty much vindicates the so-called conspiracy theorists. When I was back in grad school, I realized that a lot of what we're talking about is really just espionage theory.
Yeah.
Because espionage is real. Everybody knows that goes on. We all have heard since 2016 endless nonsense from the establishment that Donald Trump was a secret agent of Putin and a Russian operative, all of which has been debunked and discredited. So the establishment itself engages in conspiracy theorizing when it's amenable to their perspective. So yeah, I mean that's really what it is, and a lot of the focus from my side of stuff geopolitically the last several years has been about espionage stuff, because I inadvertently got interested in that through studying Hollywood and studying the history of people like Ian Fleming and their life story, and his role in real operations that he put into Bond stories. So if you think about it in that way, and I always say this because every boomer I know loves war documentaries and war stories, and they love World War II and Normandy and D-Day, and they love hearing about the Civil War and read this. And I'm like, well, isn't that a bunch of conspiracy theorizing and espionage by a bunch of the operatives and deception in the war on a mass scale? Well, yeah, but it don't exist no more. That was then. Oh, well, what do you mean it doesn't exist? Governments are still doing this now. What are you talking about? So
you sound like you don't love America. That's your problem.
Well, I don't love, look at what Doge has uncovered, right? I mean, massive amounts of corruption, money laundering, with just one cutout, USAID. I mean, there's many more.
Oh, yeah. They're leaning hard on USAID. Although I did a pod where I talk about, I hope people go watch it, where I've been on USAID contracts in various places overseas when I was doing this work. And I didn't see super nefarious stuff, but I saw a lot of really politically motivated, dumb stuff, just like they're talking about. And it's real. I've said it for 25 years doing this work, but USAID, whatever. By the way, it was not by luck that they came up with United States aid, and it's got absolutely nothing to do with that. So that itself is a move, right?
Well, I mean, look at, tens of millions of dollars given to, in one case, the most liberal Lutheran organizations, the ones that push Skittles, women bishops, this kind of stuff. I can keep going on this subject, but you go into the Cold War stuff. This is one of the ways in which the CIA went and made alliances with the papacy during the Cold War under the guise of fighting the Soviets. Well, we gotta have these alliances or else we can't win. But the problem is that when you come out of the Cold War, you're now tied at the hip to these new masters.
That's
right. And they're going to be telling you, we'd like you to go along with Davos. We'd like you to go along with World Economic Forum. We'd like you to go along with UNESCO, all of which are horrible institutions. And that's kind of where you see Francis and the Vatican II, superstructure going.
Yeah.
So that's the downside of it, is that I understand the logic of the Cold War, but, the state is always going to have a desire to, influence and change the church. They've always tried to do that, back to the Arian emperors, to the iconoclast emperors, Charlemagne. You've got these people in the state who want to create a state church, and that's the Soviets did the same thing. So, it's just church history, really. It's not really a conspiracy theory, but it's church history.
Well, I think Paul Kingsnorth, he recently did that talk essentially to Catholics at First Things, the magazine. And he kind of was saying, Christianity is martyrdom. Martyrdom is not civilization building. In the end, you'll build your civilization through the blood of the martyrs. It's not a plan that you're going to fulfill. And, you just need one more big billionaire. It's not going to work like that.
Yeah, right. Now, is what you do, is that the same as the magazine? Are those connected?
No. Unfortunately, when Ryan and I, the founder, 8 years ago, came up with our name, we knew about the magazine, but I just thought I would just overcome the magazine, but it didn't work like that. It's not going to, but on some level, no, we're not connected at all. So on some level, there is no level on which we're connected. Although I'll go talk. You want to, maybe this will get them to let me go talk at First Things. All right, you ready for this? It's called the lidometer. I'll record your number, and then at the end, you're going to have a number, and the number, like I said, it would be tattooed onto your soul. And I can't help you at that point. You just have to work with it.
Okay, well, what does this stand for?
The lidometer is a test that tells you how how enlightened you are as per the Enlightenment itself.
And I'm assuming that's a bad thing.
Well, it could be good. It could be bad. I don't know. It's just as you would like to know, Jay. I have a number. I'll share it with you after I'm done. And it changed my life or whatever. Here's you're going to answer. It's 5 questions, and then we'll get a number for each, and then I'll tell you the categories, and then I'll reveal who you are. And so you can continue your life. When you die, Jay, you won't really die all the way. It's more like you'll be asleep, waiting for a next world of some sort. So that's the question. I'll read it again. You're going to answer 3, strongly agree. 2, I agree with that. 1, disagree. Or 0, strongly disagree. 0, I strongly disagree. 3, I strongly agree. And 1 or 2 are sort of in the middle. And so you could tell how scientific this is. We ran this through MIT. They're cool with it. We're ready to roll. So I'm going to read the question again, and you give me a number. Sound good?
Okay.
Look, I can tell it's hurting your brain right now because it's complicated. You ready?
Yep.
Okay. Don't be nervous. When you die, Jay, you won't really die all the way. It's more like you're asleep or something, waiting for a next world of some sort. 3, 2, 1, 0.
A 1, because that's ambiguous. The question is phrased ambiguously because it could suggest soul sleep, which is a heresy, but it also could suggest continuing on and the soul after death in terms of toll houses. It could suggest different things. So I'm going to say, I attempted with 0, but I'm going to say 1.
1, generally disagree. And also you have exhibited problems with the question itself, with the test makers. I like that. That's very, very new world of view. Here's the second question. Don't question the test makers, Jay. Get it? Come on, buddy. All right. 2, the best way for me, for you, or I'll read it in the first person. The best way for me to know myself is to ask someone else about me. So the best way for you, Jay, to know yourself is to ask someone else about yourself. 3, strongly agree. 0, strongly disagree. 1 and 2 in the middle.
I would say 3, because that aligns even with Plato's Apology, Hellenic wisdom, and it aligns with the Orthodox ethos of having a spiritual father to bounce your assessments off of, so you don't just rely on yourself.
I like that. So not as much of an issue with the question that time. You were happy with that question. Okay. This is a big deal for me to test this against you, a sharp-minded gentleman like yourself. Number 3. We're almost done. Well, closer. When again, I'll read it in a second. When you carry a picture around of someone that you love, Jay, maybe your wife, and let's say it's in your wallet or something, and that carrying around of that picture is actually kind of carrying that person around with you. It's like they're there in some way. They're actually close to you when you carry that picture around.
Yeah, I strongly agree with that. That's our principle behind iconography.
See, guys, when I give this to when it's the secular people, as we do on the show, they don't do those cool little insights like you do. They mostly go, what is this about? Here's number 4. Respect isn't earned. Respect is owed by me to others.
Me, Jay Dyer, to others.
Yes, correct. Strongly agree is 3, 2 is agree, 1 is disagree, 0 is strongly disagree.
I'm going to have to say this is an ambiguous one because in some cases, it just depends on what we mean by respect. I mean, for example, if someone breaks into my house, they're trying to take my wife, they do not de facto immediately deserve respect. If I'm talking to another person in a conversation, they probably de facto deserve respect. So I'm going to say agree. I don't know about strongly agree.
2. I like what you're doing there.
Well, this is how philosophers think. They look for the ambiguities in the questions because ambiguities might suggest a trap in a debate or something like that.
Yeah, that's nice. I won't give this away except for to give it away for a second. When people are really interested in the what's the right word for it? The mechanics of the question, or as you're saying, the ambiguities, they tend to score lower. By lower here, I mean their number is smaller because they're doing a type of philosophical investigation, which we'll get to in a second. Number 5, last question. You fully hope and expect to take care of your parents and take them in as they get older and to take care of them when they get older and infirmed. Or if your parents aren't with you now, then you fully expect your kids to take you in when you get older and infirmed and to live with you, preferably in the same house. That vision of life, do you strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree?
Agree. And the reason I wouldn't say strongly agree is that not in every situation does that person want to live with you. For example, my dad has illnesses. He does not want to live with me. But we do participate in helping him.
So his answer on that would be like a strongly disagree in terms of his own person living with you.
No, he would not. He's a very independent-minded military person. He does not want to live with me or my brother.
Yeah.
But we do help him out. And I think that absolutely you have a biblical duty to help your family members, your parents as they become old.
There it is. Here's your, we added it all up. It happened, with AI. We did it and added it up while you were talking right then. Your score is 11. So I'm going to just grab this here as we tend to do on this show. And you can see, I don't know if you can see it, but there's you can go to the website, Jay, and you can actually see that there is a lidometer proven science money back guarantee. Okay. Now I'm going to read from it. You can find this on the website. I'm going to read what you're not. First of all, you're at 11, you are not the high nooner. Can I share with you what you're not? Yes. If you had scored between a 2 and a 4, then you would have been, well, as it says here, the shining down like a halo from a perfectly engineered drone. Science illuminates your every move, Jay. But you're not this. You're not the high nooner. You probably know exactly how the drone works. You love manuals. You trust your brain more than your mother. This is not you. You're not this person. You're safe.
So I'm not Voltaire? I mean...
Correct. You're not Voltaire. It's been proven.
Okay.
You're not also the shining city dweller on the hill. You're not this person, Jay. You have lots of hope for the modern world because you trust spreadsheets and Reddit. That's not you. If people would just follow reason, we could all have more stuff. That's not you. That's not you. You think Columbus was heavy-handed, but also if you think about it for a minute, he was kind of a badass. That's not you. That's not you, Jay. You are, in fact, a villager. You scored an 11. So we call you a cuspy villager. And here's what you are, Jay. And I want you to take this. You're happy to, I'll send you the actual words if you'd like. I can send you a plaque if you want one. There's a good chance, Jay, that you hate malls. No one in your family likes your Spotify collection, mostly because it includes discordant chants from places no one can identify. You always eat the one menu item that makes people nervous. You obey pedestrian traffic lights incessantly, Jay. You do that, and you're told you look and act just like your aging father, but somehow that's a compliment. That's you, Jay. Outhouses make you happy. Ladies and gentlemen, we've identified Jay, and now you can go out into the world, Jay, and you know who you are.
Okay. Now, the irony of this test is that if you're running it through algorithms in MIT, it's completely modern.
Correct.
That's a little ironic.
100%. I mean, we're even taking tests.
You have an AI test that will tell you how trad and beige you are. Okay.
Come on, man. How else are we going to get along in this world? I just feel better. I feel like a lot of people were wondering where who you were, Jay, and now we know. Will you come back sometime and keep doing what you're doing? And
yeah, anytime. It was a great podcast. A lot of fun.
Thank you, man. That's Jay Dyer, guys. Hey, what's up? What's going on with you? Anything you want to share before we hang up? What's going on with you out there?
Just usual stuff on YouTube. You can find me live streaming regularly. Everything from geopolitics to film analysis to open debates to even we've been doing more literary analysis lately. In the last 6-8 months, we've done a lot of books. Joseph Conrad. We've done William Golding. We've expanded.
Yeah.
So that's there, and you can find me on all the social media outlets under my name.
Are you far from us at the restaurant now? We're in Greenville. Can you come to the restaurant sometime if you're ever in the South?
Yeah. I mean,
we'll invite you.
We're between Florida, Tennessee, so
okay.
But yeah, I'd love to do that. And then I got my third book, Esoteric Hollywood 3. I just completed that a few weeks ago, so that'll be available in the next couple months.
Beautiful.
So looking forward to getting that out there. It was a little challenging because I hadn't been in the mode of writing. I've been doing so many videos and podcasts that going back to writing, if you haven't been heavy on that for 5 or 6 years, it's kind of a kind of get back in the mindset of writing. So, and then I write for the Sam Hyde Show. So you can find me there. I think the episode 4 will be coming out pretty soon. So that's usually on all the social media outlets as well.
Are you writing for Sam Hyde? Right on. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it, but that first episode, which I contributed a decent amount to, went viral. So we got about 20 million views on that first one between Twitter and YouTube. And
I loved it.
So it was crazy.
I loved it. All right, I'll share. We'll link, and and maybe I'll send you some of our stuff every now and then, and hopefully it makes it into your world. But mostly, pray for us, okay?
Likewise, yeah. You should come on my podcast sometime too. We can have a good conversation about you and your past. But yeah, you can message me anytime, and you got my number, and let's stay in touch. We'll definitely.
There's a cool connection with the film we can make, and we could talk about that forever and ever.
Oh, the Christianity film. I got one question before I go. Is that separate from where Tucker was talking about that experience of the demonic? Or
thank you for asking. So that is in the film, and that's we spent all day talking to him. There's a much longer piece to that where we sit and interview him about Christianity's, what is a Christian, how does it all work? That was a teaser so that we could continue the fundraising, which has gone very well. So we're working on that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, why don't you come on and we'll talk, maybe I'll get Scooter to come on too with you, and we can talk about that film.
Oh, why don't we? that's a no-brainer. So I'll hit you up on the phone, and then we'll just book a time. Scooter would love that, man.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent.
God bless, man. Take care.
Likewise.
We'll see you.
You too.
Guys, that's it. That's it. Jay is a villager. You know, we've gotten away from the lidometer, and now we're back in it. I think we're going to give it to everybody. By the way, what was the best part of Jay's lidometer test? Is that he was critiquing the test itself. And at the end, he saw the actual problem with it. See, this is what happens when you bring a debater guy on. When you bring a mind that's ready to claptrap stuff, what happens is they claptrap your test and turn it into a ludicrous test. Because obviously, the lidometer test is a light person test, the enlightenment test to try to test to see how enlightened you are. If you go to www.first-things.org, you can find the test. It's under Discover somewhere. Andrew, link it. If you take the test when you're done, then what'll happen is you'll be like, oh, this is who I am. And then you don't have to do anything else. Maybe confession. It's not a bad idea, but I mean, you can't really just skip out of all the things the church asks of you. Or if you're not a religious person listening to this, you can't just skip out of life because you have the number now. But what you can do is sleep profoundly well once you have your number. You sleep like a baby. You just sleep. You're just like, I'm sleeping. Because it will be so wonderful to know who you are, that you won't have anxiety. Goodbye. Tune in next time. Who loves you? On Heavy Things Lightly.